I did want to talk about reactos today, and if you don't know what reactos is, I'm gonna pull up myself and read you some notes about the project in particular from Wikipedia. I know that you can't cite them in academia, but that's beside the point. You know what Wikipedia is really good for? Often it's really great at finding citations that you can actually use through their own citation. I mean, you can't use Wikipedia itself in academia, but you can use Wikipedia to find sources to actually, use in academia. You know, it's great for that you know? And so reactos is a free and open source operating system for AMD 64 i686 personal computers intended to be binary compatible with computer programs and devices, made for Windows Server 2003 and later versions of Windows. reactos has been noted as a potential open source drop-in replacement for Windows and for its information on the undocumented Windows APIs. Now, see, I wanted to do a video about why exactly reactos was a necessary project and what an ultimate defense of reactos and everything and apologetia for it, is what this video is about, because a lot of its critics will come forward by saying that reactos is not really good for being used as your daily driver, and I'm well aware of that. Nothing that I am saying today is meant to advocate reactos as a project that should be done simply because of the fact that I believe that it will really ever at this point fully manage to achieve its goals and aims. None of that matters though. None of that is relevant. I don't think, with the model that they're doing and the way that things are going, I'm not encouraged to believe that, for as long as this project has been going on for, that it will ever really fully implement a clone, an open source clone of what it's been trying to implement clone wise, with how far behind that the project actually goes, but it doesn't have to. And I mean, that's the thing about all this. It's the frustration that I feel in such a huge way. You see, the real utility of reactos is that it is now basically reverse engineering information for undocumented features of or unintended or undocumented hardware operations. For example, undocumented extraction or software features found in computer hardware and software that's considered beneficial or useful. So the defenders of Microsoft will argue here that that Microsoft is documented through the MSDN, and that's exactly the argument that I have the most problem with in debunking. You see, the trouble in the biggest way with all of this is that the application programming interfaces that are in the Microsoft Windows operating system is semi documented or partially documented. And this is the whole problem in every way with what's going on with reactos and what's going on with Windows, at this point in the modern world. You see, reactos doesn't have to serve as our daily driver to be necessary. It doesn't have to be an operating system that practically anybody uses in order for it to be a necessary project at this point. What makes reactos necessary is that it's providing documentation for features within Windows that the developers of failed to fully document. You see, the trouble, and I can find the citation here to link to you, with a reaction to reactos from the Free Software magazine, I believe that we have to resort to the Internet Archive, which, by the way, I'm hugely supportive of and have had to rely on because articles tend to disappear off the web. So let's see. Yep. I have to pull up the React, like, because they move files around in publications like this to such an extent that it disappears. You see, I support David Sugar's view. It's particularly worth some discussion, in that this is a project in an effort to create a complete clean room re-implementation of the entire Microsoft NT operating system. And I think that this project is important, and it's important for different reasons than you might think. First of all, we do have lots of free software today that is either written for or has been ported to Microsoft Windows. For those who wish to write such software to create portable applications that they may wish to later migrate to other platforms, it's essential to be able to target a clean and generic reference re-implementation of the Microsoft framework freed from secret and undocumented behaviors. Microsoft doesn't actually offer any such thing today. Besides the lack of a proper interface documentation, many of their development tools depend on and offer libraries which use undocumented or secret API calls that are then built into applications. This is well illustrated with the difficulty Wine has with running applications, even those that were created purely within the standard Microsoft development tools, and not using odd behaviors or undocumented functions on their own. We can think of ReactOS then as the Microsoft Windows documentation project, which is what we should really think of it as. But more importantly, for those who do wish to write portable applications, or those who do wish to write free software for Microsoft Windows users, ReactOS will eventually give them the ability to write entirely free a free solution to write and test their application, or eventually give them an entirely free solution to write and test their applications with, rather than having to depend on developing and testing under proprietary software. Wine, of course, tries to offer a Microsoft Windows SDK on top of a POSIX platform such as GNU Linux, XBSD, and I think it's being ported to Mac OS X. However, Wine cannot execute or used to be developed or use drivers or write low-level free software for those familiar with Microsoft Windows. Wine depends on translation, and so has the difficult problem that many underlying services and libraries it depends on were designed or behave differently, or and may well introduce new and different undocumented behaviors. This is part of why Wine still at most only supports a specific subset of applications written for Microsoft Windows. And the truth of the matter is that Wine has come a long way since 2016 when this article was penned. So, the information that we have on wine is a little bit out of date here, obviously, in this article, but the same argument basically applies in perpetuity at this point. Like, it doesn't really matter ultimately that some of the details have moved on a bit, but ReactOS offers the same underlying functions and behaviors. In fact, they are using Wine to support the upper level interfaces, so their efforts and Wine's now do comparatively overlap for the benefit of both projects. Finally, I imagine there are people out there who have software purchased for older releases of Microsoft Windows that no longer run on current versions. I've seen this phenomenon with my neighbors' children, where they have old educational games that will not run on the latest version of Microsoft Windows. The software certainly did not stop working, and it's functional as the day they purchased. The platform it was originally run on is no longer available, deliberately removed from the marketplace, and the replacement will not run it. What reactOS has to offer in this situation is, oddly enough, greater compatibility, even for those that write proprietary software. Writing and testing it is in the future using reactOS will mean for them that they are able to write and test software that works on the largest range of Microsoft Windows as a result. It will also mean that when or if Microsoft chooses to change or deliberately break interfaces to force software to migrate to their newest operating system release, and deliberately break their own development environments and platform SDKs to force software built from them to require the same, while removing the older ones from the marketplace. Those same companies will not be forced to follow this and have Microsoft dictate and control where their software will run and what market their software can be sold to. So ReactOS is important even to proprietary software developers today. Some say ReactOS may slow new Linux adoption or development of pure new Linux applications. This may be true, but I look at the question differently. Rather, I think it will further expand the total deployed base of software as a whole, and I think that this is a good thing. My view in all of this is that this is a necessary project, and I'm defensive of it, especially because of the fact that it offers good support for wine. The relationship that exists between reactOS and wine is one of the biggest reasons why I'm supportive of it even today. The big trouble that I have, though, is the most obvious objection, which is that, the reason why this project is completely necessary is, of course, because of the Windows API itself. The Windows API has not been fully, documented, so this is the whole problem in such a huge way. As this writer in this article was able to point out and pointed out successfully about the Windows API and React OS, I happen to share a fairly similar point of view about all of it. Although I do believe that React OS itself is, and wine itself has come a long way since that article was actually written. But it's mostly the focus is now on the undocumented API of Windows that really has me saying that this is necessary. So you see, it's not necessary for me that React OS be anybody's daily driver at this point. Why React OS is so painfully necessary is that it's providing documentation for features and aspects of the API system that Windows offers that have not been properly documented in anything that you can get in the SDKs and the MSDN or anything or anywhere else via the Microsoft projects. React OS is a call that is basically doing something about that. There are some people who have the mentality that ultimately it blocks the development of it will slow the development of pure new Linux, applications. And my frustration is just that we live in a world today where people use both operating systems. You know, um, we live in a world today where both of them get used, and maybe a much wider audience uses Windows than they do Linux. But you know, I'm not adamantly opposed to I'm not really truly opposed to the project that has been together and React OS. Like I'm not like of that opinion. Sorry, a little bit of a brain fart there, but my frustration ultimately boils down to the fact that like the critiques that you will get are like, oh yeah, it doesn't work as somebody's daily driver, and I'm like, yeah, of course I agree with you, it doesn't work as somebody's daily driver. But why React OS is necessary is ultimately because at some point the people that you know that did implement over at Microsoft all these SDK features and was responsible for the implementation of all that stuff and put it all together and put it, and stitched it and cobbled it together in the first place. Those guys all know in their head all the information that is stored as far as those secret API calls, but they're gonna croak at some point. And then what's gonna happen internally over at Microsoft is only the people that have been working at React OS who have already been working to, figure out how those features work. So they're gonna have a head start, on all other developers as a result. So my own thing about React OS is that it's a necessary project, even though it's not really useful in the kind of way that we'd like to see it be useful today. It doesn't work for the purposes that I'd like to see it work at. It doesn't work as a drop-in replacement for Windows today. None of that matters. React OS development is chugging along. It is continuing to be developed day after day, and what it is doing is it's providing documentation for features of Windows that Microsoft, or micro shit, as I like to derisively mock them as being as a company, they Microshaft is another one. These guys, when they were developing their uh, software, and their software stack didn't fully, document their own code. At one point, the developers are going to croak at it, the ones that only have it in their head. And that's gonna be a real fucking nightmare, even internally and at Microsoft, because it will just get dumped on somebody's desk to figure out what the hell, like I'm gonna just shoot out a name there, Mike in programming, did before, he turned into, the late Mike. Like it's gonna be a it's gonna be a thing, And I mean, I'm not. I just invented like a random name there to to really talk about what the nightmare scenario is and the problem. I don't know the name of every Microsoft developer out there. I just don't. And I don't need to. But to make this argument, at one point, the people that actually put it together are going to end up dead, and then what's going to happen? In theory, like what's going to happen is that it's going to get thrown on somebody's desk, and it's really, I mean, who is the most qualified to figure it out? But the people that have been working on React OS and Iona, whatever. Like I don't know how to pronounce his name, but the guys over there are going to be the most, you know, necessary of everybody. I mean, the world is going to be in a crisis state at that point. There's going to be a crisis internally within Microsoft and everything as a result of it. Of their developer that was knew how all those API features works up and croaking on them, and he's been talking a bit about how these days the people that develop antivirus software are constantly calling him up and barking up his tree because of the fact that they need to understand how a lot of these features work in order to develop their antiviruses and virus solutions to these problems and backdoors that exist within Microsoft. They need updates from React OS to actually put things together. And so th- there's undocumented features within Microsoft, and the undocumented instruction or software features that are in it and found that have been found in it. The documentation is omitted. And maybe it wasn't intended for use by the end user but left for use by the vendor. But see, that's still a problem because unless like it's still going to get dumped on some desk guy that desk programmer that doesn't that internally within Microsoft that his salary is going to go way up when he has to start providing documentation for code that another developer put together and reading their documentation and getting up to snuff about what the fuck you know internally that other guy Mike in programming was up to, because he's going to have to take over the reins from him, as a result, when he ends up snuffing out on his own, and that's going to be a real fucking problem. And so we have React OS, which has done a good in that what it's been doing is that it's providing documentation for all the features that the vendor decided that they weren't going to provide complete documentation on.